Hey guys, Keely Reason here, owner of Love Hope Adventure, where I talk about the marriage relationship, intimacy in marriage, and how you can go deeper with your spouse. And today I'm answering a reader question, so let me read it for you. What guidelines do you suggest for spouses who work closely on a daily basis with a member of the opposite sex? Should there be boundaries to prevent emotional or physical connection? How do I handle meetings, texting, phone calls? And then a very specific one to their job, debriefing after experiencing traumatic events. I don't know what they do, but that was one of the things they mentioned. But the core question here is, how do you handle working in a job where you are really close with somebody of the opposite sex? I always feel nervous to answer questions like this because everybody is different. Everybody is going to feel different connections to certain people, and in a moment of weakness, the last thing I have ever wanted to do is encourage someone to, have relationships they shouldn't have. So let me just try and outline some guidelines for you. But you and your spouse are going to have to talk about this and agree on it. So that would be my first suggestion, is that you need to talk to your husband or wife about what are the boundaries that they feel comfortable with. How do they feel about you texting that person? How do they feel about going to lunch with them, meetings, whatever? What kind of boundaries does your spouse feel comfortable with? Outline that. You guys should actually have these boundaries in place for all relationships. This is not just exclusive to work relationships or relationships with people that are of the opposite sex. Because I'm going to tell you something, that you can have a friend, somebody who's the same sex as you, and you have no sexual attraction to them. You can have friends in your life that cause relationship strife with your spouse, who cause you to end up in divorce. If you are sharing about your marriage problems with the wrong person and they are counseling you in a bad way, it can wreck your marriage. It can be really, really bad for you. So I think boundaries need to be in place in all relationships, including with your spouse, but there does need to be some rules of engagement, basically. And what does that look like for you in your relationships? Well, maybe for you in your marriage, you and your husband or wife say, okay, going to lunch with that, person you work in the office with every single day of the week shouldn't be alone. You should go together as an office. Maybe it's like a situation where you say, well, because you work with them every day, a deep relationship is something that could possibly be created, so try and limit that. An inappropriate relationship. But maybe if you have client meetings with somebody of the opposite sex, that's not as much of a problem. You should definitely be talking with your husband or wife about what they feel comfortable with, what you feel comfortable with, and create a plan. Austin and I, my husband, we have boundaries in place with the opposite sex and with the same sex and with everyone in our life. We hold our relationship very dear, and we're not going to put ourselves in a position to ruin that. We have boundaries in place. And if one of us thinks the other person needs to, change what they're doing in relationship with someone, there's definitely been some times where, I've had to say, okay, that person, red flags here. We need to put some boundaries in place with them and start backing off a little. And that's not sexually necessarily, that's just, there are people that you can tell it's not going to be a good relationship. Let me see what else I wrote down, because I had a few things I wanted to say. Okay, so keep open the communication with your spouse about your relationship with that other person. If you go to lunch, if you have, a fun conversation or whatever else, fun conversation, that's a little bit too much information possibly, but what I'm saying is, if you're going to lunch with them, if you in this situation have to debrief after traumatic experiences and that's something you can share with your spouse, then you should do it. They should be aware of the relationship that you have with the people in your office. I feel like a lot of times we're just told so much, keep work at work, keep home at home, and those two things never cross. That's a little bit of a problem when your spouse is never aware of what's happening at work, and you're not helping the people that you work with know your family. I think we can't separate it so much that people don't know the people that is dear in your life. They should know who your husband or wife or kids are. You should, if you have that opportunity, be talking about your spouse at work. It's really important that you do that. It's important that you tell your spouse the people that you are friends with at your office. So another thing is, I would say keep things professional. When you're at work, be professional. Okay, so I've worked in an office. Austin and I have worked in an office with one of our best friends for 6 years. We worked very, very part-time there, but he was a very good friend before we went to work for him. And let me tell you something, when we are there, we try to keep things professional. We call him professional. He's a doctor, so we call him doctor. We don't call him by his first name. We just try to keep things professional. So when you're at your place of business, keep things professional. Even if you're really great friends with the person, there should be a level of professionalism in all situations of work, okay? But if you and your people you work with, whether it's somebody of the same sex, somebody of the opposite sex, whoever, if you start developing a friendship with them, then you need to invite them to be your friend with you and your spouse and your family. And if they're married, spouses getting together. But that person who has become a friend, who's gone from more than just being somebody I work with, if you're developing a friendship with them, they should be in relationship with you and your spouse. I don't personally think it's a good idea to have friends that never spend any time with your spouse whatsoever, like really, really good friends. I think that they should get to know your husband or wife. And this is the reason I say that. If you have a very good friend and you're sharing with them marital issues, this could be somebody of the same sex, this could be somebody of the opposite sex, whatever, and they don't know your spouse, this is where problems come in. This is where I'm saying friends can wreck your relationship. It doesn't even have to be an affair. You can have somebody who is a friend who is counseling you to leave your spouse because the only thing they've ever heard out of you is really bad things that are happening in the marriage. And so maybe they're saying, well, he or she sounds crazy, so you don't deserve that and you should leave that. I would say that they should know who your husband or wife is and have a real relationship with them. Opportunities to spend time with them and get to know them. Instead of just, well, I know they're married, but I've never met that person. It's very hard if you are listening to somebody who is sharing problems to keep to not take sides if you don't know the other person. But if you know them and your friend is complaining about their spouse, you're going to say, hey, I totally understand that is annoying to you. That is difficult. That is frustrating. You need to talk to them about it. But you know they love you. And you know that they care about you. And you know whatever. So it's really, really important that you be careful who you're sharing really personal details about your relationship with. And I would say that you should definitely not be sharing that with coworkers or friends, but definitely not coworkers, but even close friends that don't know your husband or wife. So as far as like texting goes, handling meetings, what do you do in those situations? Talk with your husband or wife. Ask them, what do they think? How do they feel about it? Let me tell you something. If you're questioning, should I text this to this person? Are they going to think that this is me flirting with them? Or are they going to think this is me crossing some line here or whatever? Obviously, you're in a place where you have to stop and step back and disconnect from that. It is not worth your marriage, your relationship, to do something, cross lines with another person. So that's kind of my counsel for you guys today. And this is not to say you should not have friends of the opposite sex, because I absolutely do. I have a lot of friends who are guys, a lot of friends who are girls. But I keep those boundaries in place. Austin and I, we know what we're okay with each other, spending time and whatever with the opposite sex. If I have a friend, I invite them to be a part of my life, including spending time with my husband and my family and getting to know them. And I am very, very cautious who I ever share anything whatsoever about my relationship with. Like any kind of actual problems that Austin and I are having, I am very careful who I share that with at all. So those are some of the boundaries I personally put in place, and they've done very well for me and for my husband. So I hope this helps you guys out. Be sure to sign up for my newsletter if you want to find out all the things I've been blogging about, questions I'm getting. I don't always come on here and answer the anonymous questions. A lot of these questions are actually answered in the newsletter, so go to lovehoopadventure.com/newsletter, and I'll drop that link in the video below. Thanks so much for joining me today, guys, and I'll look forward to chatting with you later.